To go.
Okay, we're here tonight with Sparky Watts, who's a Vietnam veteran from Montgomery County, and we're going to talk with him about some of his experiences prior to entering the military and his experiences in the military and up through the Vietnam conflict and post-Vietnam conflict. So let's begin. Sparky, where did you grow up?
I grew up rural Indiana, I guess about 2.5 miles from New Richmond, Indiana, which is 15 miles northwest of Crawfordsville. My childhood, we never moved. I lived there all the while.
Live on a farm?
Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. Yes.
And how many people in your family? Brothers, sisters?
I had 4 sisters and a brother.
Okay.
And that's a big family, but not the biggest family by any means in that area.
A typical childhood growing up on a farm?
Well, I would think at least typical. We maybe had a little less money than some, but these were pretty tough times in the 30s.
Okay. And then you entered high school.
Yes.
What high school did you go to?
New Richmond High School.
New Richmond High School.
Yes.
Class of?
48.
Class of 48. Tell me a little bit about high school at New Richmond. What was it like?
Well, I had nothing else to compare it to. It was a real small school.
How many people in your graduating class? Do you know?
13.
13.
Maybe 15.
Okay.
And that was a pretty big class for there. And it was, I got a plug where I can, it was a smart class.
Okay.
And there were six scholarships issued to state schools. And not very many of the people got to use them because they didn't have the supplementary money to go. And I didn't consider because I decided early on I was going to go to war action.
Okay. Any members of your family in World War II or World War I?
Oh, we were always, my dad wasn't in World War I. All of our family was involved in World War II. My brother spent quite a bit of time in front of Patton, which was a pretty good job. As a combat engineer. My sisters were all pretty good looking ladies, and a lot of guys came around and they all had boyfriends or husbands in the service.
When your brother was in World War II, did he write letters back?
Oh yes,
yeah.
He wrote when he could, just about as much and probably more than most men would write back.
How were you feeling during that time? I mean, you entered high school in '44, so did you keep up with the war?
We were involved as far as keeping up with the war. We kept up with the personalities. There was, of course, gold stars being hung in windows around the countryside, and we were interested in our people that were involved. One of my sister's husband was shot down over Belgium or France and spent 13 years in the underground. My brother saw heavy combat, building bridges and combat engineers, like I said, literally in front of Patton. And I learned to identify airplanes because it was the thing to do. And we didn't have anything else to do. We saved the batteries for a radio to listen to the news. And there was always letters, and we would joke about the V letters that had portions of them cut out, like they were trying to tell us what they were going to do. Our family never lost anybody in the war.
Anyone from New Richmond killed in World War II? Do you
Yes, 2 or 3.
Yeah.
Well, the Todd Legion post in Richmond was named after Donald Todd, who was killed. There was a Patton killed, several people severely injured. Yeah. And all this got my attention, and I got everybody's attention. Everybody was involved, and in 41 and 42 whole classes would volunteer as soon as they got out of high school. And there was several stories for those kids that as soon as they were 18, if they got out of high school, they all went together and were going to go fight the Huns or the Japanese.
So were you getting impatient? Did you think, gee, I want to go over there and fight when I get out of high school?
I don't remember that ever entering my mind. There was always, in our family, there was an obligation that would have to be met when the time came. To me, I was, well, I never thought about going. I don't recall ever spending a second thinking that I would go into the service. I knew when the time came that the war was going to be there, I was going to go, but there wasn't any worry about dodging or getting out of it or anything.
Sure.
You were going to pay the price
Right.
when the time came. That was the way our people up.
You said that you knew you were going to go to Wabash College.
Yes.
Why? Why Wabash?
Well, this is hard to. We had a minister that came to this little country church that was a Wabash man. His name was Lucas. He came from down in Brazil, and I didn't know anything. I was as far back in the sticks as you can imagine, really. I thought I knew everything, but I knew very, very little, and it just, we were getting to where after the war, things got better on the farm, and we had some money.
Mm-hmm.
And there had always been a hope that my family would go to college, all of them. I had a sister or two that had scholarship. My brother went to Purdue a semester and got called in, so
Sure.
he was done. And
Sure.
it was just a thing to do. I knew that when high school was done, that it wasn't a question of getting kicked out, or it wasn't anything like that. I knew that I always had a home. I also knew that it was my obligation to take care of myself. I don't think that part of my plans was just to be a parasite a little while longer. I was interested in being a little smarter,
Mm-hmm.
and I wanted to coach with a passion. And I didn't even know then how difficult it was to do all that from Wabash, because all my coaching and teaching subjects at that time were extracurricular.
Mm-hmm.
I graduated out. I'm not a, you probably figured this out, I'm not by any stretch of the imagination an academic whiz, but I did survive, and I had quite a few hours when I got done, because they were all extra hours, all the coaching, and I got everything done for teaching permit, except practice teaching.
So you were going to teach, what subjects were you going to teach in
Probably
high school?
history.
History and coach
Probably
football?
history. What I was going to teach was way back in my mind. It didn't matter. I was going to coach the state championship high school game.
In football or basketball?
I didn't play football in high school.
Okay.
That was a dream I had when I showed how naive I was. I was going to go to the West Point and play football at West Point, never having even played in high school, but Blanchard was doing it and Davis was doing it. I don't know whether you remember that.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, but I didn't think that'd be any problem at all for me. That's how dumb I was. And I was just going to go to Wabash, and if I would have thought through it, I would have probably picked another school, on account of teaching stuff.
Sure.
Everything I had to 139 hours, and that was a pretty good little.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
What was Wabash like from 48 to 52? A lot of returning veterans?
Oh yes. And I held them in awe, because we respected the people in our family that had gone and the things that they'd done, and there was a lot of heroes everywhere then.
Sure.
When we put on the ruptured duckweed, everybody got a little bit extra awe, and some of them wanted to talk and some of them didn't want to talk. Wabash was really something then, because the V-12 wasn't there, but the veterans that came back that had walked across France and seen a lot of combat. I can remember well that I knew what jump boots were. And when I was 17 years old, going to kick the people and poop out all these guys playing football, and I didn't have any idea what I was getting into. These guys were 26 years old and rather mature, and I had learned from my older brother that you better pay attention. You better pay attention to these gurus, because some of them had a very simple incentive program.
Yeah.
And I never had any trouble.
I would imagine some of the classes were particularly interesting, history or something like that.
Well, like I prefaced this, academics wasn't, I was talking to somebody just the other day, Chuck Gaynor, a guy named Chuck Gaynor was going to Wabash time, and we just wrote letters on our 50th anniversary this year. And Chuck wrote in the letter in the book that we got that he never let academics interfere with his football and other things. And that's not the way I was.
So, did you play football 4 years?
Yes, I did.
So you were on the 51 undefeated team?
Yes, sir.
And there were some really good football players.
There were some really good football players that could ring your bell and nothing flat. And mine got rang a lot.
What position did you play in the football?
I was a guard.
That was exciting.
Yes, it was. I had speed and quickness going for me. Other than that, I was scared to death most of the time, but I didn't try to let anybody know it. Because these guys were big, and they were good, and they were old. And that year between 17, the first couple of years right in there are important years.
Right.
For maturity and physical maturity, and quite a bit to do with mental maturity. Right. He was a real good friend of mine. He weighed 260. In front of me most of the time, old Lou Jones, he's still around. We still joke. And I made a compact with him. I said, "Shit, don't lay on me." You get down in that pile. Yeah. And you get a couple of 250 pounders laying on top of you. The first thing you know, you have trouble catching air. Yeah. And it was fun like that.
So, senior year, second semester, what made you decide to enlist in the Air Force?
I had no particular choice. It was either that or the Army. I had to get deferred for the last 3 years. I was going to be a platoon. The Marines had a platoon leader program. I'll kiss my foot. And when I went to take the physical, I don't have any arches in my feet, and I just got my clothes off and stepped out, and this Marine said, "You can't do it." So I held on to I had to maintain the C average to get deferred. Right. And then when we graduated, I knew it was going to happen. I worked here in town for a guy named Dick Huseman, who later was Montgomery Savings loan officer, a real fine man. And I worked all that summer. And then I took the Army test and went over to Indianapolis with a kid from Waynestown. And we took the Army test, and he got 100 and I got 100. And I said, "Hey, no offense, but I said, this outfit must be pretty weak if I get 100 on the test." So the Air Force came out with they call it a contract program. I could enlist in the Air Force since I had a degree. I could enlist in the Air Force for 2 years. As compared to 4 years. I could go to aviation cadets and get commissioned in 9 months. And my master plan at that time was my patriotic fervor wasn't as strong as it had been because we had some buddies from Wabash. Kid named Mom from Logansport. Played football, went to Korea and got killed by Thanksgiving or Christmas. And anyhow, my master plan was to enlist the Air Force for 2 years, wash out of cadets, and I had a 2-year commitment as compared to 4. And then I got into a real good cadet program.
Where?
At Harlingen, Texas. I couldn't pass the eye physical. And that was, God was taking care of me then. I don't think I had the temperament to be a pilot. But, and then one thing led to another, and way down in deep, I'm just a little bit competitive. A couple of guys said I couldn't make it. And then I played softball on a base softball team, so I didn't have to make the separate gig line and got treated a little bit better, and we got off the base a little bit more. And one thing led to another, and I completed the program. Went out to Mather Field.
So your commission is second lieutenant,
Yes, sir.
and what was your job? What,
I was a second lieutenant in a training program for navigator or observer or non-pilot, we'll say, a rated position on whatever it turned out. At that particular time, when I went to Mather, I got for B-26 school, because B-26 was a real good airplane.
right.
And everybody liked the B-26. You know, you're just wandering around looking for something to do. And then got out to Mather, and that program was phased out. The war ended. And then they were just running around there with assignments, you know. And MATS, the Military Air Transport Service, the terminology is all changed now. They were cargo troop haulers. There was a base at Great Falls, Montana. It was a MATS base. I said, hey, that's a pretty good deal. Go up there and do a bunch of hunting and fishing. And so I got in that program, and then we went up there in the MATS program, supposedly to train pilots to work their radar systems better. They had a radar on the airplane that nobody knew how to run. And we got to Great Falls, there wasn't anybody there. They had all gone to Germany to fly the airlift, or an airlift. So we stumbled around up there, and then they started bringing in some old KB-29s, which was a modified B-29 for refueling. And we got in on the, well, really it was, no, not trying to be, it was the beginning of fixed boom refueling. There had been some drogues and some pipes and all this, but they welded a couple of pipes on the tail end of the B-29, and lo and behold, we were tankers. And that was an interesting and challenging experience. Tagging on old B-29 was pretty well used up. And you had to know a lot about aircraft systems and whatnot to make it. We never lost an airplane up there, and that's one of the, it's surprising that the airplanes had been, some of them had been mothballs and come back out. Refueling was so new, and we were working, even then we were working with fighters, SACATs and fighters then. They had not very many. But they started out using fighters to deliver the bomb, because the fighter could come in and Chandel and pitch that thing far enough so that he wouldn't blow himself up. And then,
so you're deciding this is a pretty good life, and you're going to make a career out of it.
well, I was going to go was supposed to get out in October of '56. I got married early in '56 and had a baby, born 15th October, and I was going to get out. I'd been accepted over University of Montana. Was going to go there and get a master's. They had, I think, of the 48 states then, the secondary education in Montana rated 48. And I talked to the baseball coach. I had a year of baseball eligibility left. He said, no problem. I said, but I'll be a graduate. He said, that's no problem. So I was enrolled at the University of Montana and was going to go over there and get my master's and teach. Because Montana paid good money to teach. You could teach up there with a two-year permit, and still going to be the greatest coach that the world had ever known. And then I got all checked out, had everything cleared except my chute, and I needed 4 hours to fly that month to get paid, and I strapped on that chute, sat in the nose of that B-29, and I says, I can't quit this. So they were begging for people to stay there. Now, Air Force was always short on navigators. And so that fed on. And yes, I had a lot of fun.
So so you re-enlisted over the next 8 to 10 years. Where were you? Where did you go?
Well, let's see. It had been 56, 58. Okay, then this B-29 was an old piece of junk. And the 97s, KC-97s were around in the world. And we upgraded to KC-97s. And I'd been up there a long time. And in those days, you could kind of pick an outfit if you wanted, because they didn't transfer then name, rank, and serial number. If somebody needed a navigator and they put the commitment on Great Falls to ship them a navigator, why, they sent a worm. Really. The rich got rich and the poor got poor. And that's the way it went. And I wanted to stay up there in the worst way, but I was afraid something was going to change. So soon after we upgraded into 97s, then SAC took over a training squadron, Randolph Field, to train their own people. They didn't like the way the training command was training their people. And that was a war that within itself. And I have to say I was a pretty decent crewman. There's probably better navigators, but I got along with crews and by coordination, and we always had a lot of fun. And I bought my turns. When it was my turn to buy rounds, I bought, and so I had a chance to go down there. Since I've been at Great Falls the longest of any navigator there, and I volunteered to go down to Randolph Field with San Antonio. And in 97s, I was down there 4 years training 97s. And then the 135s came in, and as soon as I left there, I upgraded to 135s and went to Blytheville, Arkansas. And I had 4 years there, and when I got through at Blytheville, Arkansas, I had 5 years on the combat ready crew and 2,000 hours of prime time and a degree. And that meant I was going to go to the Minuteman II missile program at Grand Forks, North Dakota. Brr. So I did. And that was a 4-year directed duty assignment, and we were passing over a lot of fun and stuff. But then that was 4 years where no assignments could bother you up there. And
what was your job there?
As a missile combat crew commander.
Explain what you did.
I fought from daylight till dark for 4 years to preserve my career. First off, I didn't like missiles. Second off, I wasn't flying. And I didn't mind Grand Forks so bad. The weather's, it's the coldest place in the world.
And you had Minuteman missiles there?
Minuteman IIs, yes.
Yeah.
Sir. And I was a I was a combat crew commander. The missiles are set up with a launch control center that has primary responsibility for 10 missiles, secondary responsibility for 50 missiles. And
Defensive or offensive capabilities?
sir, these are offense. No, all offense. The battle, well,
What was the range of a Minuteman II?
how far you want to go? I mean,
Really?
Oh yeah, it was Russia and China.
So these were all targeted on specific.
Yes,
yeah.
yes. And something that nobody understood. Well, I didn't understand the missiles. I didn't understand a lot of the technology. I had a block, besides being mostly stupid. I didn't want to. I was a crew commander. I had at least one man in the launch control center at the same time as I was.
These were in silos?
The missiles are in silos, but there's 10 missiles in 10 silos, and we're sitting in it. And then as luck would have it, why it was what they call the alternate command post. There's one launch control center that was supposed to take care of the war when they blew everything off the face of the earth. It was an awesome experience. I've got a chance to fire my shots, ran by a bunch of incompetent dummies. You understand what I'm saying? Now, a lot of them were people, and I say this, this is probably prejudice, but the command system in missiles, first off, was based on the premise that because the missile flew in the air, Air Force should have it. The second thing was that most of these commanders and people who were in there were people that didn't want to fly to begin with, and I didn't like that kind of folks.
Right.
But it was all, this missile system itself was awesome, top secret, crypto running out the ears, and no way to protect yourself. I mean, there was things on there, parts went into that missile that you couldn't even touch. You had to carry them in special things. And it was power that people were trying to manage and didn't even understand. As far as I'm concerned, didn't understand it. And I'm not talking about griping. I'm just,
right. Everyone had a nuclear warhead on it, right?
Yes, just one. Just one. Now they had them before they blow them up. Now they're imploding all of them. Some of them, I think they got finally the Minuteman. Well, there's Minuteman IIs over at Monstrum. And some of them have multiple, some of them have decoys. There were so many things that, so I didn't even know when we went up there that this was not coordinated. The missiles weren't coordinated with bombers.
Mm-hmm.
And the big deal, I've been in airplanes all the while with war orders with B-52s that we'd take off and fly and refuel them and take them and go there and study the war plan, how to walk back from Russia. and come to find out in the meantime, probably wouldn't any of them get back anyhow, because daggone, the missiles could make it over there in about 19 minutes, and all they were going to be doing was blowing the hell out of whatever they were going, plus a few B-52s. And the old Vietnam joke was, well, if you can't take a joke, you know. And I didn't know that until I got into missiles.
Yeah. So during this time, when was the first time you heard about Vietnam?
Up there, I guess I went up there in '66. Before that, we joked, and there's a couple operations that SAC was involved with early on, taking airplanes over. See, we were the only ones that had tanks. And I knew some buddies in Blytheville. I never did call it Young Tiger. You took fighters to Vietnam and worked them a while and then came back. And that was all high altitude work with fighters. They'd take some over, and sometimes they just go and refuel, because that was the biggest, one of the biggest advantages we had was we as a military force was tankers. Because we could, you get an F-4 or something up in the air, you can keep him up there until the pilot would run to dry.
Right.
And there was some guys going, but we were in SAC, and you weren't, the only time you went was what's called temp TDY. And you just went TDY and came back. And then, like I said, we went to, early on, as soon as we went to Grand Forks, we knew that we were going to go to Vietnam afterwards. And I think we took maybe two trips to Vietnam from Blyville. It was a good trip. I mean, you know, it was a fun trip. You stayed out of San Bernardino, March, flew across to Hawaii, and then you went in and probably hit Guam, and then you taken six fighters. Each tanker had 6 fighters, and there's usually 6 tankers. 4 fighter. Usually took in 24 airplanes.
Okay.
24 fighters.
Okay, and you take them into where in Vietnam?
I don't know. We took them into the coast.
And then they were on their own?
We took them into the coast and made the military zone, and cleansed my soul and say, because we got credit for a combat mission if we got over Vietnam. And you go in and break it and come back and land at Guam.
So how many of these missions did you do?
I don't have any idea on those. That wasn't very many. That's just a couple.
Yeah.
And then
then what happened? How did you get more involved in Vietnam?
well, when I got to Great Falls, or excuse me, Grand Forks, I always get those mixed up. Grand Forks, I was going to go for a year in Vietnam to get my tour out of the way. I didn't have a tour. You can be TDY over there if you don't know it. You can go TDY forever.
Right.
And that don't count for your tour.
For your tour. And it was a requirement to get a tour in Vietnam.
Oh, it was a requirement. I thought it was a requirement. I had a couple of chances to. I had a flight surgeon who thought I was nuts because
What was your rank at this time?
Major.
Okay.
Major.
Okay, so your tour in Vietnam, where was it? Describe it.
Well, that particular tour was at Phuket Air Force Base.
Where's that?
About 15 miles west of Quy Nhon, about 70, 80 miles east of Plato, Con Tum City, Central Highlands.
Okay.
It was a closed base.
Okay, and what did you do there?
I flew in what they call electric goons, C-47s, new stuff. C-47s. We had some pretty good radios, and we carried two intelligence men and very intelligent men, and we stumbled around the sky in a damn low goon at about 7,000 feet, and our job was to monitor and fix low-freak radios for the bad guys, from the bad guys. All of their communications, and I think this is very interesting, all their communications between each other, most everybody, was from the old Arc 6 Army issue generators that fired their radios, and they communicated with that Arc 6 low freak. We had a Doppler system and a system on a goon that I could fix it. If he didn't monkey with his antenna, I could fix him within 50 meters. Then,
and by fix them, you mean
locate him.
Locate them.
Yes. Sometimes the intelligence people wanted to listen to them and plot them if they were moving, but most of these intelligence guys wouldn't even talk to us. I mean, they had a mission and they were good.
So how many people, or how big a crew was this flying the C-47?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
5?
5 people. 2 intelligence men, pilot, co-pilot, and me. And I fixed we would fly past, we'd just go searching, and they would pick up these people sending Morse code. And I'll bend your mind here. Did you ever think about how you send Morse code?
Tap it out.
Okay. Do you tap it out in Chinese? No, I'm serious. I'm serious. It never occurred to me. No,
Yeah.
Morse code's in English.
Right, so they had their own code.
No, they have to use English or numbers.
Ah, okay.
They got English or numbers. And that always amazed me. These guys says, but they could read, those in touch could read a man by the style of his tap. And they'd say, oh, there's old such, they give him names. Oh, there's old such and such, wonder what he's doing today. They listen to him and say, we don't want him, he's the same place he was yesterday. And they would track him. And then if he wanted to say, let's go get him. Then if he just wanted to relocate him to see if he had moved, well, I could fix him and relocate him. And then he'd say, hey, we want him really bad. Then we'd fix him, and then they'd shell the hell out of him if they wanted him, or send ground troops in to get him. And it was an interesting mission. I enjoyed flying the old goons, but we didn't have any altitude to work with.
And there was no fighter support or anything like that?
No, we owned, I never knew of a MiG to be over Vietnam. MiGs are all out in the Gulf of Tonkin, or north. And we didn't have, we took some, I'm sure we took some ground fire, and I'm also, and most of it we didn't even know, but you said 5,000, flying 7,000 feet over 5,000 foot mountain, you're within range. We had we had more trouble, and I never could get too concerned about it. I guess it's ignorance on my part. We had trouble with artillery, because when they were taking a target in close, the artillery was going up through our altitude and back down.
Sure.
And we get arty calls sometimes, but all you can say is big sky, little airplane.
Sparky, what year is this?
I went 70.
Where?
Went into Vietnam on my birthday in 1970.
Okay, so 70, so the war's winding down.
Yes.
How big a range did you fly? I mean, any idea, radius of how many miles?
Yeah, well, I don't know for sure about miles. We flew up, you probably heard of the Oshaw.
Mm-hmm.
We would take off at Phuket, fly up, it'd take us about 2 hours to get there, grinding away in a goon.
So what's the speed of one of these things?
That's a good choice word, one of these things. Beautiful old airplane, but I forget where it's redlined. I think it's redlined at 275. We'd get to monkeying around sometimes, riding clouds, and just see what the old hog could do. But we cruised maybe 190.
Okay.
We'd go coast out. When you flew in Vietnam, you went over, at low level, you went over water whenever you could. We'd leave Phuket and go right straight out about 50 miles, and fly up to beautiful beaches, come in at Da Nang, and then go in and fly over the Oshaw. And the Oshaw was all done. The big bad days of the Oshaw Valley were done by the time I got there. It was pretty peaceful.
How about south? Did you go?
Not very far south.
Yeah.
West, clear over. We flew over into Cambodia quite a bit.
Okay.
And yes, there was some bombing in Cambodia.
As we heard.
And the senators and representatives never could figure it out, but if you look down at the ground and see these great big blue, they call them offshore swimming pools in the whole damn jungle, they'd waste, you immediately suspect that somebody had dropped a bomb there. As a matter of fact, in Cambodia there's a free drop zone where you didn't even have to get clearance to drop
You just
your
dropped
order.
it.
You just laid her down there, and it was, my God, I bet that and flew. We couldn't fly very far north in Laos because the mates could come down there, and they had guns on the China border. There was a trail that went from the northern part of the trail across Laos down to the southeast. And in later years, when I went back in '72, there was a young kid that didn't understand the world, and he flew a 135 over there. And he didn't get shot down, but he got close enough with a couple of heat seekers. They class 26 airplane, so we didn't fly there. No.
So, on this base, how many planes were there?
Oh my goodness, there was several F-4s on Phuket. There was several F-4s, and I suspect we had 20, 25 goons. Mm. It was a big operation.
Perimeter defense by the Army?
The Army, yes.
Yeah.
That particular base was a beautiful base. Of all the things, the Corps of Engineers had built the base. There was grass on the base, the kind that's on the ground. And we took some rockets, but they would instead of going for the barracks, and this is that Oriental mine working, instead of going for the barracks, they went for the fuel bladders. My God, there was big 500-man barracks is there, full of GIs.
Right.
And they would always try to go for the fuel bladders because they were just laying out there on the runway.
Sure.
And they thought that really demoralized the troops. Whenever the rockets started coming in, where everybody get up on their trailers and start taking pictures and stuff like that. It was nuts.
It was entertainment, something to do.
Yeah.
So during this period, 70, talk about the war at all? I mean, did people say, what the heck are we doing here? This doesn't seem to be getting anywhere, or what?
We didn't. Not everybody's pretty cynical by then. Our outfit and I was sold on the job. I mean, I'm waving the flag that much. If I can take out a guy that's maybe going to rock me first time he gets a chance, I don't like him very well.
Yeah.
And we weren't in the mud and the blood and the beer, and nobody on our base was, because it's a closed base.
Right.
And that's a different thing. That's different than out in the field.
Yeah.
It's just altogether. I had a good place to live. I had an air-conditioned trailer. The other 4 guys were, and all flyers were supposed to have air-conditioned sleeping quarters. And our outfit had high esprit de corps. We had the best mess hall, and there's places where I would eat at that mess hall today if I had a chance. And that's nothing but luck.
Sure.
No credit for that. We had a pretty decent outfit. There was always some guys screwing off, but nobody had anything else much to do except fly. And there's been times, man, I wouldn't do anything to fly to get up above that daggone clouds and rain and everything, and just get up there and fly.
Would you fly a mission a day, or how often were you out on missions?
Okay, the way that went, you could fly 135 hours maximum a month, but you couldn't average more than 115. The first month we went in, we flew the maximum, which is a lot of flying time. 135 hours a month is a lot of flying time. Our missions were mostly 6-hour missions.
Sure. And
then the second month we pulled back, working on this, can't average more than 115 a month. And then the third month, for all the wonderful things, after flying 2 months of combat, we went to Okinawa for water survival, because we didn't have anything else doing. It's about time to get out of country and see the beautiful sights of the other world. And we went there for water survival, which was really a good program to help you. Like I said, every time anybody in the Vietnam flyer ever had a chance, he went over water. Because there wasn't anybody there to get him, and we owned it. I swear I've seen the Gulf of Tonkin. We walk across there on ships. And if the Navy pilots didn't drive you out of the air, you were in pretty good shape. I'm worried about them more than the MiGs.
Sure. Yeah.
But we didn't go out and refueling that part. I was alluding to the tanker organization when we were bombing them in '72.
Okay, so your first tour ends when?
October of '71.
Okay, October '71. Did you sign up for another tour in Vietnam right away?
No, I didn't sign up for another tour in Vietnam. As a matter of fact, I came home a month early because of war. We were getting ready to give our airplanes to the RBN.
Right.
And my wife's grandfather, who raised her, was sick, and the squadron commander says, "I'm about done with you anyhow. If you want to go home, just call the Red Cross and we'll ship you home." So I came home and went up to Grissom because my family was living in Richmond, and I volunteered for Grissom and got it. I knew that I was going to retire, so I went up there, commuted from home, and had a deal up there where I was ranking navigator when I went in there, and they already had, it was a pretty clicked up outfit, and they didn't want to have much to do with it. And then in April, I was hanging around home. We got a telephone call when the bombing started in '72. But I volunteered to go back. And I said, "No, I don't think I'll volunteer. I've been there and done that." And I had a real good pilot that I was flying with at the time, major who had been passed over. And I didn't, the SAC always had a policy, if anybody on the crew did wrong, they hung the aircraft commander. So I didn't want to cause too much problem. And they said, "Well, we're going to go because they're going to start this big bombing deal." So I didn't think I was going to go back. And I'm sure there's still a wake across the Pacific from my heels dragging. So we went back there, and then as a crew. I went as a crew.
You went as a crew. What month would this have been in '72?
April.
April '72.
April '72, and stayed till about September, I guess. I don't know for sure.
Okay, April through September. Where were you based over there?
Tok Lee,
Where's this?
Thailand.
Okay. And what kind of missions are you flying now?
We're flying mostly B-52 support and tanker and fighter support for the bomb.
You're refueling.
Yes, this is 135. This is
Okay.
high altitude.
Right.
We're out of guns in high altitude.
Okay, so at the base in Thailand, you primarily have the B-52s flying the bombing missions, and how long of a flight would it be for B-52s from this base?
They're not going from there.
Oh, they're not going?
They're going from Guam and Okinawa.
Okay, and you're meeting them.
It's a hell of a long time. We were meeting them up in the Gulf of Tonkin.
Okay, and doing the refueling up there.
Yes. And whether we got them going in or coming out. And then there's always fighters. There was always fighters up there. And sometimes if we had a B-52 that we took care of, if we had any fuel, if anybody came across needing any, he got it. Now that was a rule of the West as far as our crew was concerned. A lot of crews wouldn't do that, but hell, you could top off a fighter with 5,000 pounds, and if you had any left, well, we'd refuel. A lot of fighters didn't even know who they were.
Sure.
Those guys were cool dudes, and if they went across a F-4 flying that 150 miles across North Vietnam, he went supersonic to start with, had to come back subsonic to drop his ordnance, hit supersonic to get to the other side. He was done. He didn't have fuel. And I took exception in. Things were getting pretty crazy because, and I got really cynical then because most of the commanders that were there then in the Air Force were guys that had been riding the books all through the war and come up that the war's winding down and they know it, and they don't have any combat time, they don't have any command time in combat.
So they wanted their ticket punched.
They wanted their ticket punched, and they performed that way, and they didn't want any dumbass guy like me to flying combat, make full colonel on account of combat record, and they didn't have one.
Yeah.
And it was sick. And then another thing, and this is it's simple, but the rules of efficiency reports are that an officer, and I think enlisted men too, are supposed to have can have a OER written if they're with a commander or for 30 days and they change crews, they're supposed to have an OER. Well, if your TDY over there and you went to the bay, we were supposed to go to Korak, which was a first-class base. It's a Cadillac base. And we pulled in there, and the commander there at the time was a guy from Griffiths Air Force Base up in New York. Well, I was getting kind of surly when people started telling me about combat. I've already had a little bit of experience, and I mean, it wasn't anything. Most of our stuff was milk runs.
Right.
But there was occasionally there was some bullets, sometimes even your own. Doesn't make any difference. A bullet's a bullet. And they couldn't write ERs. If we didn't belong to that commander, we weren't in his outfit, he couldn't write our ER. And we went in there and he says, you all are going to Tockley. Well, they'd given Tockley back to the natives long enough for them to steal everything that was loose. Everything that was loose. And I said, oh man, I had a real good buddy at Korak. He had me set up in a VIP quarters, and I said, well, if I'm VIP quarters, I got my crews in VIP quarters too. I didn't have to worry. What are they going to do to me, Toby? So I had some pretty serious words with this guy.
Yeah.
He says, I don't give a damn, you're going to go to Tockley anyhow. But that, see, he wasn't writing my ER. So the way they did that, they took commanders from the States, sent them over to command these places, and the only people he could control was his own crews.
Mm-hmm.
So he sent us to Tockley, and then he took some and had them send some crews to his base over there that were his to begin with. Then he had, there wasn't ever a question on flying a mission. My God, every crew I was ever on, fly that thing into the wall, if they said.
Sure.
But the politics on where you were living was something else. Then we got sent down to Tockley, and we were illegitimate. We didn't have any sponsors because our commander wasn't there, and there's another commander, and we got the garbage.
Yeah.
But,
April through September '72. Did you understand why we were stepping up our bombing campaign at that point? I mean,
no, I had hopes that we might hit Jane Fonda, but
you thought she was up in Hanoi, huh?
no, I wasn't.
Because
It
this
wasn't hard to reason why, as far as I was concerned.
Because this is when the peace, initiatives are really getting fanned.
Yeah, they're probably still even holding peace meetings with Korea for that.
Yeah.
But I thought we were doing good. And there's some of the picture that I didn't understand then. I understand it better now. But
Yeah.
I understand more now that we never had a chance to begin with on that deal, because there wasn't any way they could quit the North Vietnamese or the South Vietnamese, the Viet Cong South and South. Hell, they didn't have a leader to tell them to quit or anything else.
Right.
And I never questioned that, except that My opinion was if we're gonna bomb them, we could have sent them back 50 years, probably even more than that. With the firepower that they had up there with the buffs that were hitting there, all they had to do was work on that irrigation system, and those guys wouldn't have grown any rice for 100 years.
Sure.
And
Did-
war is war.
When you're doing this refueling in the Gulf of Tonkin, did you see any planes ditched? Did you see any planes get shot down?
No, I worked a lot of guys, we worked a lot of guys were in trouble. There was a line out in the Gulf of Tonkin that you weren't supposed to fly closer. You weren't supposed to fly into the country any closer. It was just a line, a big line.
Right.
A red line on the map. And we had a policy, and it doesn't make any difference. If a guy was coming across there and he took a hit in a tank and lost fuel, he didn't have enough to go home. So we'd go get him. I mean, that was just a policy on the crew we had. Hell, I argued with people, you can't do that. What do you mean I can't do that? Well, we got two flying in there, and see, we can tow an F4. If he's anyways near sharp, and they get sharp pretty fast if they need a tow, we could toggle him on manual override and put that boom in there and give him a hell of a boost on not much fuel going home. And he don't have much of a future, even if he has some land out there in the ocean. That's still not
right.
They put wheels on those airplanes to land them on a runway, not in the ocean. So no, and there was always a lot of guys squawking for MiGs, but I never saw a MiG.
Okay.
Never saw a MiG.
So after that tour ends, when do you get out of the Air Force?
I got out of the Air Force on first available day, the 29th. You retire on the 30th. You retire the last week of the month, January 73.
It's January 73 you
Yes.
retired.
Yep.
Was there any question that you were going to retire? I mean, did you think about staying in longer? Or?
No, there wasn't any question about me staying around longer. I loved the Air Force. I loved to fly. I wasn't impressed with senior officers, and I was at the reservation. I was a senior officer, but I was a working senior officer. I said when I went to Grissom, which I was there when I retired, and I went to the wing commander or the wing navigator and said, look, I know where I am here. I was ideal man to be in a AACS outfit. They were going to get in the service to be able to launch missiles out of airplanes. And I said, I've had this missile experience. He says, I'm the man, but I don't want the job. I'm going to retire. I said, let somebody else have it that needs it. And I was flying just straight, like the Air Force saying, buckcast and navigator on the buckcast crew. That's all I wanted to do. And finish it up. And the situation there was that a couple of commanders, well, the wing commander, which is the numero uno man, and the base commander, both painted me out on the last ER because they said that I had applied for retirement and not to be considered for promotion to full colonel. And I had not, because, and he asked me, well, you have? And I said, no, I haven't. And he said, why, if you're going to retire, why didn't you retire? And I said, because somebody would have tried to do foul things to my body. And they had written an ER, this is a political statement of the way the force was then. This aircraft commander that I had before was still being considered for lieutenant colonel, and he wasn't on the base, and they forged my last ER. They forged it. That's not, he wasn't even there, and we had some pretty serious words about that. And then you just have to give it up. You're not going to win that battle. And
Sure.
I did talk to some legal people because I was a little bit upset. I didn't think that was very nice treatment. I had done pretty good. I can't help it if I had fun doing what I was doing. I mean, it was still, I had done my duty, and
Yeah.
that's about all there was of that. And when he called, then he called SAC headquarters. He called me a liar. I says, "You call SAC headquarters and you see if I put in for mine." And he called. I hadn't put in for it yet, and then I says, "Now who's a liar?" And that was an unpleasant day.
Yeah.
He told me to get out of his office and never come back, and that was exactly what I had in mind. So it was
Yeah.
everybody, my problems weren't any worse than anybody else.
Right, right.
But I did think there was some things that were right and some things that were wrong. And I don't know that he'd spent any time over there or done anything else except try to screw up people's careers. But, and it was across the board in the Air Force at that time because the war, these guys were the senior officers that never thought about making a living on the outside were beginning to get pressed. And I guess I was too dumb to worry about what was going to happen on the outside. I'd always made out some way. I'd always made out before.
Sure.
And civilian life didn't scare me all that much.
Right. Right.
I was a little bash man.
You could do anything, couldn't you? That liberal arts education. That's what we trained you for.
Except speak Spanish very well.
Yeah.
Now I really need it.
April 30th, 1975, fall of Saigon. Remember?
Yes, I remember well.
What did you think that day?
Well, I thought I'd load up my shotgun and stood in the backyard and fired it 3 times right in front of my kids. And I thought that was a sick way to go. But even then and looking back, I was sorry to see us not be able to win, but there wasn't any way. I mean, even militarily, there wasn't a way. As I see it now, we could have bombed North Vietnam back 50 years, 75 years or whatever. South Vietnam could never capitulate with it. They didn't have any government there to capitulate with it. There was nothing, there wasn't anything that would work. And they wouldn't even know what to do with that war anyhow,
Sure.
in my mind. And
So, did we make a mistake getting involved? And in the first place?
my opinion is that it most probably stopped some of the domino.
Okay.
Another thing, then we can go back in the big picture, if I can see the big picture, and I'm not saying I can, but some things I learned in time. Was the Cold War a failure? People say, well, looky here, Russia, this union is dissolved.
Right.
It would have never had dissolved if it hadn't been for the Strategic Air Command. Now, I'll go to my grave believing that, and nobody will ever, if they don't see it, then they don't see the big picture. But if the deterrent hadn't been there, the LeMay started in the 50s, and we continued forever and ever against every bit of hope that had ever been made against the military, the Strategic Air Command kept that from happening. And it's the same thing with that war. It's a shame that so many people got killed, and it's a shame that they weren't honored. And that's about all.
Yeah.
There's more acts, I think. I remember World War II pretty daggone well. And I think there's more acts of heroism and GI ingenuity involved in Vietnam than in World War II. And damn well in World War I, because all they did in World War I is everybody stood in a big line and they shot each other. And the last one standing raised the flag.
Talk a little bit about the West Central Vietnam Veterans Group. When did it start?
It started soon after we all came back. I got involved right away, I guess in about 72 or 73. 73 it would have been. There was a big group then. 150, I suspect.
Really?
Oh yeah. We had a couple big homecomings and whatnot. Had a couple, 3 legislatures were going to come to homecomings and they didn't show up. And then it's just, we had meetings and everybody told their stories, and that's about all there was to it. I mean, and that was a big part. We tried several things to stay financially solid, helped a lot of people. A lot of people that, and I don't want to be critical. I went into Vietnam on my 40th birthday. I was an old man. I had kids old enough to go. And I think even though I'm pretty immature, I was mature enough to know that I was a lot more stable than these 18-year-old kids that didn't have any kind of good training to start with and got sent in there not knowing anything about the big picture.
Right, right.
And they all had their stories, and they come back and we got together and did a lot of things, and then we hit on this mean something business to make money. And that's been going on ever since. Now there's, just, I guess, 8 or 10 really active guys.
A question that my students always ask me, they always say, why didn't the Vietnam veterans join like the American Legion when they came in?
Okay, I can tell you real easy. It's the same as everywhere else. I have been a pretty decent beer drinker in my life, and when I came back, I drink. I didn't drink because of the war. I drank because I like to drink beer.
Right.
And I used to go out there. Nobody ever at the Legion, nobody ever says, "Hi, Sparky." I mean, a lot of people know me around town. You know how about that? At that time, when the bar was open there, they had chairs. That was a table bar. And I even, go in there. If there's a chair there, I'd sit down and have me a long neck, or 2 or 3 or 5. And if you were sitting in somebody's chair that was customarily sitting in that chair, why, you weren't really all that well. But I never had anybody. I used to like to listen to the old guys talk, Well, how many hunters did you kill? What'd you do? I don't know anybody ever said anything at all to me about what I've done to Vietnam.
So do you think there was a conscious effort to kind of exclude Vietnam veterans?
I don't know that it was a conscious, no, I can't say conscious. I think we're talking about guys in the Legion and in the VFW.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about guys that were 30 years away from World War II, the same as I'm 30
Right.
years away from Vietnam.
Right.
Now there's a hell of a lot of difference in your attitude 30 years after than it is a month after you come back.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, and I don't think that's not the Legion's fault. There were some people that didn't want a bunch of kids coming in there and running their business.
Right.
And that's normal.
Sure.
I mean, I may not feel the same way. I don't have anything against the Desert Storm person. I never got involved with it. He's on his own. Damn it. It's his turn. And one thing I can reason is a lot of those guys felt the same way. I mean, and a lot of them did pay attention to the war when it was there. They never saw the mud and the blood and the beer or anything like that. And they were treated a lot different when they come home than we were. I never had any. Some of these young guys did. I mean, people were pretty rough.
Right.
And it's not. And there's some lasting impressions when I came back. Like I said, supposedly mature. And they say, don't wear your uniform when you come back to this country. And then I came into Travis. I got off the airplane, and they said, "Oh, there's a bomb threat. Can't go into base opposite Travis." And you had to travel on the GI airplane. Come back, you had to travel on. I had on short sleeve khakis, and I thought I was going to freeze to death out there, standing out there. I would have killed any hippie I could have got my hands on, whether he had a bomb or not, because it was cold, and I wanted to get my baggage and get the hell out of there. And
you've been to the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, Washington, D.C. How many times have you been there?
Twice.
Twice. Describe your feelings.
I can't. I got some, and that's about it. I got some feelings.
Yeah.
And that's the way I feel. When I go there, and I won't go anymore.
Right.
I'll never go again. We had the war. We had the portable, the mobile.
The moving wall.
Yes. Gary Bell did that.
Right.
He did a hell of a job.
Right.
And it's just a feeling that I don't have. I got 2 or 3 buddies on there, and I know the wall. When it was here, it was a funny experience. We spent a lot of time out there, and we had the catalog there on who was here and who wasn't. And I saw a guy just pacing out about 50 feet. And I went out there and I said, "Well, can I help you with anything?" And he said, "Yeah." He's pretty torn up, but he left a buddy over there. And all that time he left him there, and he didn't know whether he had made it or whether his name was on the wall.
Sure.
And it wasn't on the wall. And he was a happy hombre. And it's just the way that that's presented and the way it's been done, and the problem it was to get the wall there. And I have feelings that I can live with without. I don't think I harbor any bad thoughts, but we have bought our plaque to put on the courthouse steps down here. We bought that ourselves.
Right.
And paid for it and put it up there. Gosh, they got half the Spanish Navy out here to depart from the Spanish-American War.
Which raises an issue that we've talked about at Wabash College. You know, that there is no recognition on the Wabash campus of guys who died in Vietnam, who were Wabash graduates.
Yeah.
And there were some.
Oh, I'm sure there were. Not surprised. I'd see names every once in a while. Of course, this all gets put back in the fuzz of your head.
Right.
Of a couple, 3 guys. A guy named Kenny Peak, I think, ended up being a big man in the Air Force. And some guys, there was a lot of guys that ripped the bullet.
Right. Have you seen any of the Vietnam movies?
I don't watch very many of them. It's not a big thing with me.
Yeah. A movie you might be interested in is the one that's out now, We Were Soldiers.
Okay.
Because it deals with the Central Highlands. It deals with the Hai Drang Valley, the battle in 1965.
Yeah.
It's based on a true story. It's really well done, and it's a very positive view of the American military fighting in Vietnam. I mean, it's sort of a glorification of the people who went to battle and gave their lives and survived.
Yeah, I don't know. I flew there. We flew over the famous graveyard at in the hills north. It's north of Phuket, where all the French people are supposedly buried.
Oh, Dien Bien Phu?
Yeah, I think so. But we didn't know. I never knew exactly where we were flying.
Right.
I didn't have to worry about getting home because we weren't that far away from home. We had radios, and I never kept a navigation log. We just ground away out there in an area. We had what we called barrels. We flew in a barrel, and we just ground around out there. We had 5 radios on that airplane. We had HF, and all of them, FM, and we listened. And that's the reason why I could say that there's more acts of heroism and whatnot in that war than people can imagine from airplanes being. These guys would get, those facts would take hits. And just like oh my goodness, now I'm gonna be late for the club, what am I gonna do, you know? I mean, they'd just get shot down and then they'd go get an airplane and go fly again and get shot down again.
Right.
And the rules of war they had over there was, a lot of them were just kind of gentlemen's agreements. If a pack was working down there a couple 300 feet and he had a gun on him, he wouldn't take that gun out unless the guy fired at him. That's just a rule he had. But if that guy ever put a round toward him, he took him out.
Yeah.
And he took him out in a way that he understood he was took out, because he called in every damn bit of ordnance there was and blow that gun position clear gone.
Sure.
And,
Well, we've talked now about an hour and 20 minutes. Any final thoughts? Anything you want to say on the video?
I've given a lot of my thoughts already. I feel sorry for a lot of people, and I'm not being noble. I feel sorry for a lot of kids. You've heard some stories here, I hope, that are hard to imagine. These young guys didn't know what the heck they were doing or why or anything else.
Right.
The whole world needs to know that. That's different than a lieutenant colonel living in an air-conditioned room that's flying some combat missions that are 9/8 milk runs anyhow.
Sure.
I mean, it's not like you're in there and some guy is blowing the hell out of your tank or putting you on a mountain and to die on. And I think a lot of them have done real well, and a lot of them haven't done so well. Maybe it was because of the war, and maybe it wasn't because of the war. I'm reluctant to blame anybody. I've accepted that a lot of the guys that did a lot of drinking and whatnot, when they come back, maybe like to drink beer about as well as I did. But that's not for me to say, because we don't know. I don't know what you did. I mean, you know, I know that there is a camaraderie between those that have been and those that are not. And it's something that you can't put, it's like seeing the wall. It's something you can't put a finger on. But if the guy says, I was there, then he's something a little bit different than another guy. And I'm not saying he's any better or any worse, he's different. And the stupid rules that we had to go by coming home and worrying about drugs and this, that, and whatnot are things that are in my mind, and I can understand real easy why they would affect a young guy. It's really bad, because most of them lost their girlfriends and everything else. So that's all.
That's a good place to stop. Thanks.
Yeah. That's good.